This episode is sponsored by Focus Features, presenting Conclave. This year, let the conclave begin. Conclave is a stunning cinematic achievement celebrated with 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Actor, Ralph Fiennes, Best Adapted Screenplay, Peter Strawn, and Best Picture of the Year. Rare is the film that endlessly entertains and is phenomenal in every respect. Conclave is hands down the Best Picture of the Year. Conclave, for your awards consideration. If you address the socioeconomic sort of homogeneity, the homogeneousness, what's the word? Homogeneity.
They're all those words work, Elaine.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. It's Thursday, February 13th, and I'm Elaine Lowe, staff writer at the Ankler and author of the series Business Newsletter. I'm joined here, as always, by Sean McNulty in New York, and here in rainy Los Angeles by the Ankler himself and Ankler contributor Nicole Laporte. We've got a full house today, so welcome, welcome.
We're having snow in New York, Elaine. It's very exciting.
Ooh, snow? Beautiful.
Yeah, we didn't get any last year, so we're making up for lost time.
Feels a little late, February.
Well, February still, it can snow here at the end of March, or it used to be able to be back in the day. But a little very white outside, very, very picturesque here in New York.
And Richard and Nicole, you guys holding up okay in this rain, this much needed rain, et cetera, as we all say here. We need it.
Oh, yes. Only biblical weather in LA.
Yeah, exactly,
we only do fires and floods. Yeah, no,
the extremes out there.
Just anything that justifies not leaving your house for
right.
Or either evacuating or staying inside, one or the other. There's no in between.
No in between here. Well, I'm taking the wheel here for Sean because, as always, once a quarter, he goes into earnings mode. And today he had the pleasure of covering Sony largely, right? But also Roku after the break, after the jump?
Yeah, Roku. Once I finish this recording, I'll hop on the old Roku call. Sony, I was not up at 1 a.m., just for the record, to listen to the call. But our executive editor, David Lidsky, gave me this fun fact, which I did not know. But they do in-person earnings calls with, the analysts in Japan.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did that make me feel weirdly excited, Sean? I was like, I want to be there.
It made me feel excited. When David told me, I was like, what? I'm like, this is how it should be done. Forget this 80s conference call technology that's still used throughout the whole U.S. financial system. People come, and I'm like, I kind of want to see what this is all about. But that was my new unearthed fun fact from David.
Wait, okay. If you had a choice and you had to pick one company to sit in IRL on earnings, who would it be? Pick your favorite.
This is a tough one. Ah, man. TKO, Mark Shapiro always he's always got a lot of energy going, and he'd be fun to watch, probably, I think. I don't know. We'll
Define fun.
For me and David, Richard, this is exactly, define fun. But Zaz can bring some game. We'll see. He's coming up on the 27th. So, I could see Richard and I coming and sitting in the front row for that one and just, wearing some T-shirts.
I thought you would have picked a classic. I thought you would have gone Iger.
No,
Bob Iger at Disney.
3 minutes this year. It's it would have been boring. I would have gone for nothing. I would have gone what? I came for a show and I got a 2.5 minute speech here. That was it. So that would have been a bust, Elaine. So yeah.
Or Netflix back in the day, Reed Hastings in a BoJack Horseman sweater.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore. That's the old Netflix Elaine. They're a little more grown up now. So no more of that going on. So maybe,
you don't go and when you do Disney, paint your face.
Well, we could. That would be. That's what I'm saying. We could get T-shirts. We could make this a thing.
Mickey Mouse ears.
Have the whole tailgate party out front. And
this is basically why they don't do this, Elaine, in America. I think because this is what
that's fair. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, it all tracks. But over Japan.
Yeah, give us the TLDR on Sony here.
Look, Sony Pictures Entertainment is, I think it's about 10% of total Sony Corp revenue. So, very much tucked inside there. But revenue up, profits down. They made $2.6 billion in Q4. Profits were down a bit because they had, marketing costs on films. But, they're going to be a little bit lower on revenue and profit. They have one more quarter in their fiscal year. Elaine coming, their Q1 is their end of their fiscal year. So probably a bit of a down year in revenue and a bit of a down year in profit.
But they've got a decent slate this year coming up, right?
Yeah, it's, TV, Elaine, is really, they had a big 2023. It seems like they sold a lot before the strike or whatever it might be, but they got, and that's what we've seen with them, Elaine, is, they are the most active in getting first look deals and overall deals with writers over the past, I'd say 9 months, just in the trade reporting. It's been it was nuts there for a while. So they're reinvesting in TV, and that's the revenue that needs to that's what's dipped probably the most. Movies, obviously, quarter by quarter. If you have Venom in one and you don't have it in the other, it's going to, be more variable on that. But I will say, and Richard, I mentioned this before, they're doing 11 movies this year in 2025, which is not,
that's like a pretty high number.
Not really. No, that's as many as Disney. No, I mean,
No.
Way back, Richard, we talk about the slates, we double that, in previous times. So, but 11, we'll see if they slot more in and, we'll see how that goes. But that was a curious thing. So, they still cleared $223 million in profitability, Elaine. So they make money, they make movies, and make TV shows, but definitely the TV studio is probably the biggest thing that the new CEO, Ravi Ahuja, has to kind of keep an eye on there with the new era of the new CEO.
All right. Well, we'll keep reading the Wake Up newsletter every morning for more updates on all the earnings. And,
Roku will be there on Friday. Yes, exactly.
Roku. Yeah, that's what you'll be writing about on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, Richard, get your purple face paint out for Roku. That's the purple color there. So
that color. All right,
yeah. So prep it up tonight.
Well, switching gears, want to take a look at a piece of Axios reporting yesterday, which said that Disney is getting rid of its Reimagine Tomorrow initiative, which is this program that spotlights stories from underrepresented communities, and that internally it's replacing its DEI performance factor with something called talent strategy, and now has the old diversity and inclusion factor sort of umbrellaed underneath that. A lot of changes, sort of stuff that a lot of which came out in the fine print. Richard, you took a closer look at that in your column this morning.
Yeah, so they had a special announcement to subscribers this week as part of their updates of their terms of service and their subscriber agreement. There was a clause in there that they clarified that as they continue to increase the breadth and depth of the content we make available to you, circumstances may require that certain titles and types of content include ads, even in our no ads and ad-free subscription tiers. So if you were buying a ad-free tier, it's more of a vibe ad-free that we're kind of free. We and ads are free. We're not ending
the spirit of it, not the letter of it. Yeah. So that was one part of the fine print in the new Disney fine print today about their not quite so ad-free tier. But another part of it dealt with their diversity and inclusion methodology, or their diversity inclusion element, right?
Well, yes. So that came in that came out there. It was a memo sent by the head of HR to the Disney employees. That was it's kind of a masterpiece of legalese and corporate speak that you have to read about 19 times to try to decipher what they're saying. But in there, they're talking about they're changing the factors. They have different factors that are involved in guiding executive compensation things, which doesn't mean it determines executive compensation. It's just here is a formula by which someone will make some sorts of recommendations that we don't know if they're followed or not. But they're introducing a new factor called talent strategy. People will be judged on how they succeed in talent strategy. And diversity and inclusion used to be a standalone factor, will now be part of a general talent strategy factor, folded
into that.
Yeah, folding in with storytelling and creativity and synergy. So you will be, to some extent, if you're an executive, judged on your talent strategy and how well you've done on these three things. It doesn't say whether you'll be judged equally on them, but you'll be judged on them, and that may or may not have something to do with how much you're paid. So it's sort of meaningless on 8 levels, but what is meaningful is that they made this announcement that they're getting rid of their diversity and inclusion line item, whatever you call it, 3 weeks after Trump takes office and declares war on DEI. And I don't think that's an accident. The announcement says this has been in the works.
Right.
This arises out of conversations with everybody. It has been in the works for a long, long time. And goes to
way
great
back to
pains.
November 7th, I think. Actually.
Yeah,
Right,
goes to great pains to make clear that this is just part of the process and the procedure has nothing to do with anything. But clearly it is completely related to something.
Right. I mean, the reason why we're even talking about this at all right now is because of the peculiarity of its timing. And, separately, The Hollywood Reporter noted today that Amazon Studios has quietly retired its inclusion playbook and apparently did so in September. Now, that's something which you all may remember launched in 2021 and had goals of filling at least 30% of its roles with women and people from underrepresented ethnic or racial groups. I remember, it was a moderately big announcement that they had made back then, especially coming off of the heels of 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement, and a time when Netflix and Disney and all of these major companies were making a lot of big proclamations about their commitment to inclusion and diversity. And fast forward to 4 or 5 years later, and here we are. Nicole, I know you had done some reporting on this last year. You'd kind of written about the state of DEI. A lot of this does, to acknowledge, does precede the current administration, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that Hollywood is suddenly, throwing up its hands over DEI because Trump is president makes a great headline, but the erosion of DEI here has been going on for a while. I mean, yeah, if you recall, it was July of 2023. They called it Red Wednesday, when 5 heads of DEI departments were either let go or chose to leave at Warner Brothers Discovery, at Netflix, at Disney, speaking of Disney. And I mean, leading up to that, even there's always been, I just think the whole rhetoric around DEI in Hollywood has been, where, it started off very well-intentioned, and post George Floyd, there was a lot of passion and support for it. I think it then quickly began to change into, this is an overcorrection. Just in talking to, I did a story about the Latina Squad, for example, not long ago, which is a group of Latino women in development in Hollywood who created this group because they just felt they were not being supported. They were not sort of getting jobs. They weren't being helped by Hollywood. And a lot of them talked to me about their experiences. And when we talked about DEI and what it had done for them, they largely called it performative. They would be called out to, such and such a streamer, I will not name the name, was having some event in Inglewood, and they would call up the Latina development woman to come and cut the ribbon. So I think there's two things. One, DEI, I don't know if these initiatives, the question is, how much have they accomplished?
Right.
If you look at the endless reports of, how many white directors there were in 2023, it's like 80%.
Right.
How many people of color are actually have green light authority? I mean, aside from Netflix, I don't know. So I think there's that question of, how effective were these DEI initiatives to begin with?
Right. How much structural changes have we actually implemented? And then secondly.
Yeah. And then secondly, were they actually supported, or was Hollywood pretty quickly looking to get rid of them and dismantle this? And now along comes Trump to kind of justify it all. So anyway, I think it's just been this kind of murky, dubious endeavor that, I think performative comes up a lot when you talk to people about it. So
the language was still on the websites and whatever. This is just what's happening now, is that language is going out, but the actual dismantling of these things, as you mentioned, in the great Hollywood cutbacks, that was a big kind of casualty of that.
Yeah, so much of that is tied back to the industry-wide contraction, right? I mean, you look at Warner Brothers Discovery, I think their DEI program was at one point 50 to 60 full-time staffers large, and I imagine that number is much smaller now amid the cutbacks of the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I remember actually when I did the DEI, I think the title was "Did DEI DIE" in Hollywood.
Right.
But one thing that came up with a lot of people was tracing the origins of the decline in DEI initiatives to 2022, when the Netflix stock plunged and suddenly, everyone started pulling back and contracting, and things like DEI were the first line item to be cut. So, I mean, we're going back, how many, what's that, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's not a long history. So how much time does this, Linda, your point about the effects of it, like how much time did it even have to seed? I mean, it's like a 5-year arc. I mean, back to those earnings calls, Elaine, it's like in 2020 when George Floyd, like every earnings, like diversity, like, they did like those word diagrams, of like words said most often, and like you could go back and look at that.
Everyone talked a very big game in 2020 is what it comes down to. And I know even then, covering it then, there was skepticism about
Well,
how committed are they to actual inclusion on a long-term basis. But I also think
5 years
there was
is
a
the
great
answer,
deal of hope then that they meant it, because there hadn't typically been a history of corporations like these making big proclamations. And I think there was sort of an idea that, okay, if you have a company who's actually coming out and showing you its values, like maybe we've turned a corner on how corporations talk about their values.
Anyone who believes a Hollywood pronouncement that doesn't have specifics tied to it, I wonder how you still have a roof over your head if you you believe that. Go through. No one's going to film in Georgia again. Well, you go through the whole list of great pronouncements.
And you're referring to the reproductive rights,
yes,
Right.
legislation and happening in Georgia, right? I remember that.
There have been 1,000 of those pronouncements and special offices open and everything. And if you believe them, then you are the sucker that this whole place was made for.
It's just a sense of cynicism, Elaine. As I said, a lot of this change probably happened. It's just like now it's finally being removed, and it's just kind of like, told you. Like that, that 2020 stuff was bullshit. And it's like, everybody's like, yeah,
Although, I think it's easy to say it's bullshit in retrospective. But when you talk to the people, there are a lot of individual groups and even executives at these studios who had very high hopes and, very well-meaning initiatives. And, you sort of look at the state of things
there was
now.
a lot of effort into it. It's just, but net 4 or 5 years later, it's like, all right, well, it's all gone. So
when something's an actual commitment instead of just hopes and aspirations and we're going to do better, like you see what that looks like. It's a commitment looks like. It's like commitment. We're going to, they give you their commitments all the time. We're going to cut 500 jobs this week. Like that's a commitment.
That's a hard commitment. Yeah, follow the money on it. Yeah.
When they say we're going to work and establish systems and get people talking to each other and really promote this and put this in the foreground, and it's kind of like the more you say, the less I believe.
Yeah. But I'm really, like, in thinking about this though, it's like, look, I'm bringing a little more cynicism to it than maybe isn't merited. I understand that, but I mean, it is, Richard said, you see pronouncements all the time and how many of these things stick. But the thing about Hollywood that's different than a tech company doing it or a pharmaceutical company doing it. Hollywood's not alone in removing this language, by the way. Let's be clear about that. This is not a Hollywood-only issue. This is happening in many, many companies. But, we don't make pills. Like, we have to appeal to wide audiences, and it behooves us to make products for different audiences and different tastes and backgrounds, and having people who know what those audiences want. Which, look, speaking as a white guy, it's like, I don't, maybe not dialed into, the Latino audience. And it's like having those executives in-house benefits financially a Hollywood studio, because you can, that's going to be having those perspectives can have, an effect in the creative output you're making. This isn't like we're making widgets. It's like, no, you're making things to appeal to all these people because you want as many people to see your movie or your TV show. And how do you appeal? So it's not just, there's more to it in Hollywood than other industries to me, that like, this is not great business to me to not have more
that was the going line, right? That more inclusion technically equals better business. When you have a wider audience, when you look at who's, buying your streaming service, when you look at who's actually going to the movies, it behooves you to have that kind of inclusion.
Perspective in there too,
But there's such a different reception to it when we talk about it in the abstract, and it's become so politicized that I wonder how difficult is it to separate like an on-the-ground initiative, if you're at a studio or a network or a streamer, to the broader culture wars door that it always winds up opening.
Yeah, no, it's a hard needle to thread. I'm bringing very practical. How do you find new audiences? How do you make more money? I'm getting down to brass tacks here, money. I'm like, all right, it's nice to have ideas about, but I'm like, in the end, this is actually, there's gonna be fewer white guys around in 30 years than there are other people of other demographics in this country. Which way do you want to be going? So if you're going to make a more insular system, I don't think that benefits you in a longer term in a creative business and telling different kinds of stories and having those kinds of, how do you not make the same movie 10 times over again and have different ideas come in the door? But that's where it just like trips me up in Hollywood a little bit of like, I still think it's a bad policy across the board and all these other things to have the same group of, groupthink in the room. But Hollywood is a very particular business, and I don't know that that's acknowledged a lot in these conversations. But no, Nicole, did this come up at all? And you're kind of, I mean, in this, when they were kind of winding this stuff down, does this notion ever come up when you're talking to people? Or am I out of my mind on this? Am I a little crazy on this one?
No, I mean, didn't we run a story about the $18 billion Hollywood's leaving on the table, by not catering to the Latino audience? But I think, Hollywood's sort of knee-jerk reaction was to set up these DEI offices and try to get more people in the writer's room of different backgrounds and ethnicities. But the whole structure, this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people, is like the whole structure of Hollywood and working in Hollywood just caters to privileged, young people. So you got to go back to who's starting in Hollywood, who's coming in.
You're right. Yep.
And you've got to have someone who's able to support you for this, however little they pay, as a writer's assistant or a studio, executive assistant or whatever. So I just think the whole structure of Hollywood and who it grooms and who it lets in and who benefits from
privilege.
It totally favors privilege. And until that changes, I don't know how, you can move the chairs around, but I just think there's a bigger structural issue that if it could be, if that could be addressed, you could actually see more change.
Right. If you address the socioeconomic sort of homogeneity, the homogeneousness. What's the word? Homogeneity.
They're all those words work, Elaine.
Yeah. Once you address the you got to kind of address the socioeconomic homogeneity first before you get to everything else. But yeah, we'll see how many of these other studios follow suit or have quietly already been following suit with their inclusion programs, which I think after Disney and Amazon's revelations are going to get a lot more scrutiny in the coming weeks. All right, with that, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's get into the recovery effort from the LA wildfires. Both Nicole and I have been looking at essentially two different sides of the Stay in LA effort, one from the real estate side and one taking a look at who's leaving and who's staying in Hollywood after everything. We'll be back right after this. This episode is sponsored by Focus Features, presenting Conclave. This year, let the Conclave begin. Conclave is a stunning cinematic achievement celebrated with 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Actor, Ralph Fiennes, Best Adapted Screenplay, Peter Strawn, and Best Picture of the Year. Rare is the film that endlessly entertains and is phenomenal in every respect. Conclave is hands down the Best Picture of the Year. Conclave, for your awards consideration. All right, welcome back to the Ankler Podcast. Let's talk about, again, Stay in LA, which has been top of mind for a lot of people in a few different ways these last couple of weeks. This industry has been made tough in the last 5 years by all manner of economic and industry hardship, and now this year by the awful wildfires. Nicole, you and I both looked at this situation from a couple different angles. You took a look this week at the ruthless real estate market, where even the wealthiest in LA are engaging in what sounds like the real estate version of the Hunger Games. So tell us, how bad is it out there for anyone who lost their homes and has been trying to figure out a new place to stay, a new place to buy, how to rebuild?
Yeah, the Hunger Games, that was a great quote from a real estate agent who just said, it is so crazy out there, both in the leasing market and the selling, buying market. Even a rental in Mar Vista, you call, it gets 30 bids. It goes for $30,000 a month. It's worth like $7,000 a month.
Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah. The bottom line is there was already low inventory in Los Angeles, especially on the sale market. And I think the immediate aftermath of the wildfires, you saw all the leasing, like everyone just wanted to rent. And so you saw the price gouging, and then the government, of course, California cracked down on that. They've arrested 2 agents who engaged in rental price gouging. But I think, when I was doing my reporting, it was sort of shifting from, oh, wait a minute, like we're not going, you were starting to get the information from city council and local government members who were saying, no, you are not going to be moving back in a year. It's going to be more like 2 years, 3 years. I think people were just realizing, even if their house was standing, but it was in a burn area, like this was a very long-term situation.
Right, the amount of repair.
By the time they get through all the toxic ash and the infrastructure and redo the pipes and all this. So suddenly there was more of a shift to like, well, let's buy a place, or at least this is a more long-term situation. So yeah, in the buying market, it's crazy. Like,
right. Where do you even buy a place when the entirety of the Palisades is gone? Where have people been looking?
Well, a lot of the Palisades folks who have the ability to, who have this kind of cash on hand or have the resources want to stay on the West Side. So areas like Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Little Holmby have become very popular. And particularly homes that are, as they call them, like move-in ready. Like you don't need to redo the kitchen. You don't need to, redo, it's not a tear down. You can actually move in tomorrow. I mean, those are going just crazily. Like a few examples, I think there was one that it was like 10 million, I think in Little Holmby, that it was like 5 days in escrow, all cash deal, boom, done. Also, people are moving down to Manhattan Beach, which is like the new, they now call it Palisades South. I think a lot of families with kids, especially who wanted like the Little League practice to be back up and running, went down there. And there too, like these houses are just selling for cash, millions of dollars. So it's crazy. And then, but within that, I'll talk to people who are like, I'm stuck in purgatory. My house is in Rustic Canyon. I can't move back in yet, but I'm waiting to hear when I can. Meanwhile, I'm in this rental on Bundy and Olympic. It's a nightmare. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And even when we're talking about rebuilding, you quoted somebody who was saying that even 18 months for debris removal is an optimistic timeline. And I remember when I was talking to a TV director whose home burned down in the Woolsey fire in 2018, he rebuilt entirely from scratch in 2 years. And that seemed like the fastest timeline possible. Like, it sounds like we're talking, 3, 4, 5 years here, right?
Well, as someone said to me, if someone in government tells you 18 months, like, that's
double that?
Automatically, equals 10 years. And I think the 18 months was just for debris removal. It's like there's so many different processes
before you can even get to the part where you rebuild.
There's not nearly enough contractors around and builders to begin to
do all the work.
All these assumptions are based on like that there's crews that can just do all this.
Yeah, although even some of those contractors have been impacted badly in the short term. I was talking to an actor, Kristen O'Meara. I interviewed her for the newsletter this week. Her husband is a contractor, and because the homes that they had been working on were all in the Palisades and those homes are no more, he was laid off. Now, she's anticipating that after the debris removal, work will pick back up again. And, then presumably there'll be a lot of business, a lot of work to go around. But
I think there's good times ahead for him.
Yeah, but even right now for contractors and builders, that's a tough market.
Well, you have all these new homeowners, I'm sure, are going to want to change things about their homes. So maybe there'll be some work to pick up on that. But
try to make things more
everything
fireproof.
has to be built now to, fire standards. They're saying they want to make the streets bigger. I mean, all the pipes. I mean, the infrastructure alone that has to be redone. Like, you need to be able to use water when you go back to your house. So
nice, But Lane, I saw there was a piece in Bloomberg I put a link to this week. It was a burned down home in Palisades that was, worth on Zillow, worth for, I think it was $2.5 million. And the empty lot sold for, they listed at $999,000 and they got over 50 bids for a lot. Wow. There was no house there, and this was in the Palisades. I'm like, so it's not even just the homes, Nicole, that are going to be bid on. I think it's going to be these plots of land that people in that prime real estate neighborhood that want to rebuild on it. So it's which is just very hard to comprehend, but it's the reality that people are living in Nicole.
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine it's going to just all be Rick Carusified.
So what's going in there? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This was a very modest looking, not for the Palisades, but it wasn't like this 3-story mansion home. It was a home that had been there for many decades. And, it wasn't a fancy, it wasn't a huge lot of land. It was just like, this is what is getting well over $1 million bid
it's a land
for
grab.
The land alone. It's a land grab. Yeah.
You got to wonder long term, quantifiably, like how many people is this going to drive out of the city? Like, Nicole, you and I both talked to people who were already talking about moving back east. I talked to somebody who had already gotten his visa and was preparing to move to London, a camera operator who said work has just dried up here so much. He used to work 120, 150 days a year. Now he works 30 days a year, especially after the strikes. And the fires for him reaffirmed his decision to move. How much of that were you hearing, Nicole?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, like you say, people who work in the industry like things as the Ankler covers in detail. Like, it's really difficult, and it's been difficult for several years now. I think if you layer on Los Angeles, to me, it's post-COVID. I mean, the homeless situation, the cost of living, it's a really tough place to make it work. Throw in a fire and lose your home. Yeah, I did talk to some agents who one said, yeah, I had a client and their house didn't even burn. They weren't in a burn zone, but they were like, I'm out. This is done. This is kind of like the last straw. I'm moving back east. Another person in entertainment I talked to, they were affected by the fires. Their house is still standing, but they're still evacuated because of water and ash and everything. And she said, I can't leave because of my work. Like I'm tied to LA, but my God, I wish I wasn't. So yeah, I think that's really common. Yeah, and I'm even a friend of mine now who was on Mandeville. The house was like on the news. It didn't burn, but it's completely, they have to throw everything out, get everything HEPA filtered. Yeah. And now, they're about to evacuate for the mudslides.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, like, how much longer are you going to live there? Like, when does...
I mean, the rains are helping, but they're not helping, right?
Right. But like, at what point does the mid-century modern beautiful house on Mandeville Canyon become like not worth it? I don't know. I don't know. But it's a question.
But it's funny you put that 3 years out there. That's the Olympics. Like by the time before any of this is back, I
have had that thought. What is this city going to look like by 2028?
Yeah, that's what you're talking about is 2028. I'm like, by the time this is anywhere near, that's like, okay, just put that in your mind as terms how long you'll be, out of sorts.
Well, and that's the thing in terms of getting contractors. And
well, right, yeah, add that on top, Richard. Yeah, exactly.
They've got an Olympics to build and a subway system.
A lot of work to be done there.
Still building that subway to the sea, right?
They are, because I'm in the traffic every day. They are definitely building it.
I mean, Wilshire has been under construction for like 2 years now.
Yeah.
But also, just to touch on it, to round it out, Minority's had kind of column in Serious Business, talking about how Fox is shooting all their shows in Ireland and back to the production. And it's just like, when is this hope of work coming back? And these little, things. She had a great read. It's a little separate, but related, but separate. But it was another good read about just the work in LA not coming back. And Fox seemed very happy shooting in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, the floor shoots in Ireland, all these other shiny floor shows shoot in Ireland or Australia or wherever else. I mean, and again, we've talked about the tax incentive or the lack thereof for unscripted and nonfiction shows. It's no wonder why we're seeing a big exodus.
Yeah, but it all ties together for sure. It's not just one, it's not just a real estate story in that sense, but a lot of factors, as Nicole should say, into the thinking of just, how much more of this or, what's the long-term outlook for this. This isn't just what's my next year. It's like, what's 5 years look like, at this point. So.
Well, let's round out by talking, since it is, listeners, you'll be hearing this on Valentine's Day, a couple of the stories that Richard heard from young people working in Hollywood today, looking for love.
Richard, you're doing a piece for my dating life. Well, you didn't call me. What's going on? I'm a little disappointed. I didn't.
Are you really a young person in Hollywood, John?
Were you ever a young person?
Well, listen. I looked. I play 35 on TV. No. Yeah, certainly not, Richard.
Someone did text you that.
Yeah,
he got that text. Someone asked you, "Why didn't you call me?"
Yeah, exactly.
People were insulted.
I know, Richard. You're doing a story about dating in LA. So what'd you find out, Richard? What's the tea from the next generation?
the like that hip lingo.
Exactly. I'm with it. I'm hip.
Yeah, skibbity.
I know what's
Sean,
up.
Yeah. Well, like everything else being young in Hollywood, it's tough times. It's with this especially dire because you have all the craziness of being young and overworked as an assistant in Hollywood, with the general craziness of the world of online dating and the fears and the horrors of that. So everyone I talked to said it's very tough. There were a couple hopeful stories of people that found them and broke through, but
how hard were their bosses making it for them? These poor overworked agency assistants and studio assistants.
It's not like the bosses are particularly attacking they say you cannot have a boyfriend or anything, but as much as like they call them on Sunday and expect them to do stuff and be working and doing it. And it's really, you're working every single night of the week, and
when you're on call 24/7.
Yeah. And you're just, it's just very hard to have anything. I just put the note there to the bosses of Hollywood, just that I'm not a protector of the snowflakes in this field. And the kids that want to do all their work at home, I think, should really consider their priorities. But, the flip side of that is there have to be some boundaries. And the fact that, say, work hard doesn't mean become a slave and turn your life over entirely. And I put it out to the bosses of Hollywood. If you don't know what the boundaries are, then consider that you may be the problem here.
But Hollywood historically has never had boundaries. I mean, that was the whole Jeffrey Katzenberg.
An industry with a history of good boundaries.
The track record's not great. Yeah, exactly. That was Richard reading your piece. I was thinking, there was a point, everybody, when I was a young person in this industry. For the record,
when
thank
you were
very
a young
much.
person in this industry, Kurt Loder was on TV, Sean.
Yeah, probably all cable TV also. But
the boundary in the old day was that you didn't have a cell phone. So when you left your house,
that's exactly what came to my mind, Richard. Exactly.
You left your house, and you didn't have email either. So
exactly. That's exactly. I just gotten a cell phone. My first, I was already working for a manager for a year before I even got a cell phone, and it was whatever, $1 a minute or something. So like, if you called me, this better be freaking good.
Yeah.
But and I worked for a great guy, and but it was Friday night. I would say, see you Monday morning. And, if something drastically, when I was an emergency, maybe he would find me. But I mean, that was maybe happened twice in 2 years or something like that.
Like you weren't likely to get a call at home on your landline from your boss.
No emails. There was no, Richard's point. There's none of that.
They couldn't just dash off a text like, I need you to go pick this up. Like
he had a BlackBerry. I didn't have one. So he could email me, but I wasn't getting it. So, it does have that. I mean, yes, Nicole, you're right. It's never been a famous industry for having boundaries of that sort. But there is the technology just takes down so much of it. And in your piece, Richard, people are also saying, between even planning a date to meet someone, you're like, I have to go network here after work. When do you have a free night? It's like, I'll see you in 2 weeks is my next opening. It's like having those boundaries or trying to protect that stuff, Richard, is tough in a schedule, which is, it was, I'm glad the research was very good, Richard. It brought me back, but it also made me relate much more to what this generation is looking at from this point of view.
Did you hear any hopeful stories, Richard?
Yeah, there are a couple in there that people,
making it work.
For some people, it's harder, but sometimes, love finds a way.
There you go. Keep hope. It's coming to you on Netflix in 2026. There you go. Free pitch.
Well, on that note, if there are any stories that you'd like to tell us, readers, about how things are going for you, about your love lives in this industry, you can always reach us at podcasts@theankler.com. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, and thanks to everyone for being here. We will see you all next week.